Hello YouTubers, and welcome to this episode of a PHP tutorial on how to build an employee management system using OOP concept in PHP. Okay, in the last tutorial we saw how we could actually populate this user's information. That's when we click on the edit button. We saw how we could actually populate that user's information in our registration field. Right now, in this tutorial we'll see how we can actually update that user's information in the database. Right, so there are actually two ways, but for this tutorial we're going to do it the wrong way, right, which is not actually the bad way. Right, it's not actually the bad way, right, but it kinds of duplicates stuff, which in programming, one of the main thing in which we are not supposed to do is repetitions, right, redundancy. So we'll walk through the bad way, and in the next tutorial we'll see the right way in how to do in order to do that. Right, so since we are using the same registration page, what we want to do is we cannot actually save this information into this register employee controller. Right, so we cannot save this registration here because actually in this register employee, it gets the data, cleans it, sanitizes it, checks if the email is valid or not, and checks if the employee exists. Now we are trying to actually update a user's information, which means the user's information already exists in the database. So there's no need for us to call the employee exists, right, because it's actually going to show that that employee already exists in the database and our query is going to exit. So we don't want to actually do that. So we'll do it the wrong way, right, and see how we can actually improve on that. So what we'll actually do is in our where we are submitting this, we want to use this same form and submit it in two places, which means when the form is being set or when we are updating, we submit it to a different controller, right, and when the form is empty, we submit it to a different controller. So you see what I'm trying to say. So I'll open my PHP here, right, before the opening form, right. I want to register another form. I'll open my PHP here. I'll open it in a more dynamic way so that I can write HTML inside. So say if it is set. Now we want to check if that get variable has been set, right. So if it is set, the employee ID, what we want to do is we want to submit it to a different controller, right, which we'll create in a minute. So we want to submit it in a controller called instead of register employee, we'll say edit employee, right, which we are going to create this file later. So we'll create a controller called edit employee. When the ID is being set, we want to submit this form to this guy, right. When the ID is not being set, we submit it to this guy, like kind of dynamic, right, you know. So I want to submit it to this guy, but how do we know we are going to edit? Because we cannot just edit an information in the database without knowing the ID of that information. We can, because we are not editing, or we are not updating, we are not updating the whole information in the database. We are updating a particular record, and in order for us to know the record in which we are supposed to update, we need to pass in the ID of that field, right, or of that role, of that record, so that we know that we'll be able to edit or update that particular record. So while submitting this data, right, I would like to also pass through the ID, right, the ID of that user's information. But I don't actually want this ID to be seen in the browser, so I'll hide this form. So I'll say the form is hidden, and I'll call the name as employee ID, right, and the value which will be passed, open PHP, and the value which will be passed is actually the ID received by the user, right, or the ID which the user has passed in. So employee ID. That is what I want to do. I want to submit this information with the ID of that user, so that I know that I'll be able to come to the database and update that record based on that user's ID, right? So before creating this file, or but better still, let me create this file. Since this file will look almost same as this, what I'll do is I'll just press Ctrl Shift S to save as, right? Ctrl Shift S to save as, and I'll save this file as edit employee. Now that our edit employee information exists, what I'll do is it's kind of bulky. Since we are updating, I will not need this guy to check if the employee exists, right? So I'll not need this guy, and if I not need that guy, it means I won't need the else statement. My else statement closes here, so I'll delete this guy here and delete this guy because we don't need the else statement. Okay, that is it. So we are getting and we are posting that same information, but there's an additional field which has been added, right, which is the ID of that user, the ID. So we'll have to get that ID of the user, right? So I'll save it in a variable called ID. That's the ID which will also be passed, right? And I'll sanitize the data, which is employee sanitize data, and we have $_post, the name of the class or the name of the ID, which is employee ID, right? Now that I'm getting that, everything will still remain the same, right? But the only thing that changes, because we'll still check if, because probably when the user wants to update this information, the user might make a mistake and not pass in the right email address, right? So we always want to validate that email address to check if the email address is okay, right? To check if the email address is okay. That's why we're checking if it's valid email address and if it is a valid number, right? So we always want to do same thing, but now in terms of querying, we are not going to insert into that table, right? We are not actually going to insert into that table. What we're actually going to do is I will remove all of this, open my query, and instead of inserting, I'll do an update statement, right, to update that record. So I'll say update the employees table, right? I want to set the value, right? So say set the full name. Mind you, or would like to do it, or want to update this particular record in a coherent manner, right? Or like to put it in a coherent manner so that everything is okay. So I'll follow this format, or go from username, from full name, username, department, and all of that. So I'll set the full name field, because actually we don't know which of the fields will be edited by the user, so we want to update the whole record, right? Because we don't know the user, the field that will be updated by the user. We want to record everything. So say update or set full name equals to full name, right? A full name variable, right? And we want the username, we'll set it to the username variable. And the next field is we have department number address. So I'll set the department, right, to the department variable. And department, we have a number, so set the number to the number variable. The address to the address variable. we have gender magical email. So I'll set the gender to the updated gender. We have magical. I'll set it to the magical, updated magical. And we have the email address. Right now, the email address, it will be new email address, so I'll set it to the new email address which has been validated. So I'll set it to new email address. And finally, we have the biography. A biography, which I'll set it to bio, which is the username that has been given. Right now, I'll save that information. I'll set other information, but where do I want to actually update that record? I need to pass in an ID, right? So I'll say where the ID of that information to be updated is this, right? It's equals to that ID. So what we have done is we're updating the employee record, and we are setting in our new information, right, which will be updated. We have the magical and the magical. For the number, it should be new number, right? So number should be new number, so that gives a new number, not 1 or 0. Okay. After we are doing that, we need to execute our query. We know that this execute query, as in the last tutorial, exists in our employees class, right? So we have a method called execute query that executes all the query and gives a status if everything is okay or not, and we are checking if the result is okay and all of that. Now, instead of writing new user successfully added to the application, what we'll do is we'll write a message showing that a user has been updated, right? And for us to do that, what I'll probably do is I'll need to put that in a variable, right? Or I would like to say your first name or your full name record has been updated in the variable, or probably I can say your username has been, the username, the employee with username has been updated in the table, right, in the database. So I'll put single quotes to concatenate that string, and what I'll do is I'll say $username concatenate this guy has been successfully, it should be double L, has been successfully updated to the database, right? And we redirect to the dashboard. Else we'll say data was unable to be updated, so that is it. So this is actually the short way, right? So if I want to edit this guy, let's say the EE employee, if I click on it and instead of writing EE, I write a bune, right, and I save this information to database, it shows RLF has been successfully updated to database, right, and it tries to redirect to the dashboard, but it shows page not found. So we'll go to our redirect application, and IS employee app doesn't exist. What actually exists is code, right? So, but if we go to our table, we see that the EEE doesn't exist again. Oh, probably this other EE exists. So let us update this and see there were 2 EE on the table, on the database. So let us update this and you actually see what I'm trying to say. So if I update this and I put Ebune Joseph, my name, and if I update, let me not just update that, but let me also update the number and put 7777. something which is visible so that you actually see what I'm saying. And the gender is female, right? And he moves from a quality assurance to a programmer. If I update that record, it says this user has been successfully updated to the database, right? And it redirects to the database, and you see this field has actually been updated. The phone number is 77, the gender is female, and the full name is Ebune Joseph, right? So you see that the data has been successfully updated in a database, right? And it's been displayed back in its original form or in the original field. So to take a recap, what we've actually done is we've taken where were we? Okay, what we've done is we are saying that if the employee's ID or the employee ID has been set, which means if we are updating, we want to change the form where we are submitting to a controller called edit employee, right? We want to change it to edit employee, so that we'll be submitting to this guy instead of registering employee. We'll be submitting to an edit employee controller that will handle our employee, and we want to pass in the ID of that current user, because we cannot update a user's information in the database without actually knowing which of the records we are actually updating, right? So it is the ID that makes us to know which of the records we are actually updating in the database, right? So we need to pass in that ID. So we're passing the ID, but we don't want the user to see the ID. That's why we're putting in a hidden type, right? So the text field is hidden. Now this information is being sent to the edit employee controller which was created, and the data is being sanitized, right? As in the previous tutorial, you see how to sanitize the data, right? This sanitized data is actually a method that exists in the employee class, right? It exists in the employee class, sanitize data, and what it actually does is it just escape the string, right? It does MySQL escape string, which means escape all strings, right? For MySQL injections, which means if a user enters programming language, that's for instance, if a user enters, instead of entering its name, if a user enters let's say paragraph tag or a script, if a user enters a script, it should sanitize that data, right? It should sanitize that data and move it in such a way that it cannot be handled as a script. Okay, so it should sanitize the data. That's what it actually does. So this script sanitizes all user inputs and saves it in a variable, and we check if an employee exists. It checks if the email address is actually valid, right? It checks if the email address is valid, which is a method or a function that has been created here that just filters the variable and checks if it's a valid email address and returns true, right, or false. So it does all of this, and we want to query the data, we want to update the database, right? So what to do is to say update employee, which is the name of the database, the name of the table, right? The name of the table employee. So say update employee and set these various fields, right? Set the full name to the full name that has been entered by the user, right? Set the username in the database. So this username is actually the username, is actually this field in the database, right? It's actually the fields. Why the ones in quotes are the variables which have been entered by the user, right? Which have been populated and updated by the user, right? So he updates that and queries the database, updates that, query the database, and gives us a result. If everything works well, it prints the username, gets the username from the user, right, from the employee, and says that username has been successfully updated to the database, right, and goes to our dashboard. Else it goes and says data was unable to be updated, and it refreshes back to the registration page, right? Now probably we are not supposed to do this else statement, because this else statement will only be executed if and only if we have an error in our code here, right? So the user will never make a mistake that will be that will actually prompt this else statement to be executed. So this else statement will only be executed if we have an error in our code here. Let's say for instance, if we're putting biography, we'll put biographies, right, which is a table that doesn't actually exist. So since we will not be able to query that result, we give false, right, and this else statement will be executed. So let us see that if we go to our table update and if we click on that, it says data was unable to be updated, right, because this field doesn't actually exist, right? So we are putting this else statement for us, the developers, to actually see if our SQL statement is actually correct. Now when actually launching or when actually delivering this project or hosting it in the cloud, what our advice to do is always remove this else section, right? Because it's needless actually, because you know that your code actually works, it's needless. So you remove this section and you just run your query that way, right? Okay, we are done with updating the data from the database, and in the next tutorial what we'll be doing is we'll see how we can view this data from the database, present it in a nice format, and to be able to print it, right? So I will remain your humble servant, Ebune Joseph from JoeDigitalAcademy.com, right? Thanks for watching, and please subscribe, like, and share this video. Until we see you next time. Thank you.